Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to The Courage to Become. I'm your host, I'm Joe Peck, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is all about the journey of becoming more aware of who we really are by understanding the experiences that have shaped us and really having the courage to grow into the person that we're meant to be. It's scary. There's one thing that I've learned over the last several years, and that's that becoming is not a destination. It's a lifelong journey. Every challenge, every relationship, every setback, every unexpected opportunity, they're all part of your path. So today's episode is called The Clarity Hidden Inside the Challenge because all of these challenges are there for a purpose. So I want to start by asking you a couple questions. Have you ever had something happen to you that completely threw you off? Like you were wondering, why did that just happen? Maybe it was a conversation that you weren't expecting, or maybe it was a career change or a loss of some sort, or a health scare, or a relationship challenge, a financial struggle. Something that made you stop in your tracks and wonder, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening right now? In those moments, doesn't it feel like life is working against you? But have you ever looked back, like months or even years later, and realized that what felt like the biggest obstacle in your life was actually the beginning of something that changed you for the better? I know I have. So I want to tell you about one of those moments in my life. This is kind of a personal moment, but I'm going to share it because it tells a good story. About 2 years ago, my husband came to me and said something that on the surface sounded pretty exciting. We were driving in the truck and just out of nowhere, now my husband doesn't talk, so again, this is out of nowhere. He told me, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to retire in 3 years, 2 days, 7 hours." I don't remember the exact numbers, but he knew the exact numbers. And so basically, to me, he was telling me, I'm going to retire in 3 years. Now, if you'd been a fly on the wall at that moment, you probably would have thought I took the news really well. But inside, I was silently freaking out because not because I didn't want him to retire. He's worked incredibly hard his entire life and he definitely deserves retirement. But my brain went completely into overdrive into how am I going to replace that income? Have we planned for this? What does this mean for us financially? That's where my head went. And this is because I manage our household finances. I pay the bills, I balance everything. I know exactly where our money goes every month. His income contributes to supporting our household. So hearing this without any prior conversation immediately sent my mind racing like you wouldn't believe. At the same time, there was a whole nother layer to this that I was feeling. I was hurt. Not because of the retirement itself, but because it felt like such a big life decision that had already been made before we even talked about it. And so that stirred something even deeper in me than money. And I'm gonna just be honest, there had been moments where I had learned these important things after the fact, or I heard him sharing something with someone else before he shared it with me. And those experiences left a mark. And so when he told me that he wanted to retire, all of those old feelings came rushing back. Have you ever had that happen? You know how that feels? It's like ugh, ugh. Something happens in the present, but suddenly you're feeling these emotions that seem so much bigger than the actual situation itself. Like it wasn't quite as big as what I was feeling. And so that's where I found myself. So the old version of me probably would have reacted immediately. I probably would have snapped at him, and I probably, no, definitely would have spiraled into panic and worry. And I would have let my emotions take over. But at this point in my life, this was 2 years ago, I had been doing a lot of inner work. And I had been paying a lot of attention to my thoughts, my emotions, and the patterns that I kept seeing come up for me. So instead of reacting, I became curious because this was a pattern. And in the past, I probably wouldn't have said anything, but I've been doing a lot of work on myself. So I told my husband that I was hurt and I explained why. And I gotta be honest with you, I couldn't help but ask, even though this probably would have failed the test for me if this was a test. But I couldn't help but ask, who else have you told? Because of what had happened in the past. And if he told somebody else before he told me, oh my God, that was going to send me into a tailspin. But when he said no one, part of me felt relieved, but then this other thought popped into my head like, have you talked to our financial advisor? Because if you want to retire in 3 years, somebody's going to have to figure out where the money's going to come from. And I can look back at that now and laugh at it. But at the time, it felt like it was so big to me. Like, did you even think this out? And, in his mind, he had 3 years to figure it out. Not a big deal. And I had 3 years to figure something out that, in my mind at the time, seemed damn near impossible. And that's where today's lesson really begins because that conversation with my husband it didn't just reveal my fears around money. It revealed something so much more important. It revealed beliefs that I was still carrying, stories that I was still telling myself. And it became one of the biggest opportunities for me for growth that I've ever experienced. And so when I look back at it now, I realize that conversation wasn't just about retirement, it was about awareness. And we all know how much I love to talk about awareness. One of the greatest gifts I've given myself over the past several years has been learning to become aware, not just of what's happening around me, but of what's happening within me. Because that's where I've learned life doesn't just happen to us. Life reveals us. It reveals our fears, it reveals our beliefs. It tells the stories that we've been carrying. And these are stories that we've been carrying, and there's a way to tell our story, and we haven't even known it. We've been carrying all of these stories and haven't even realized they're there. That conversation with my husband wasn't what created my feelings, it's what uncovered them. It brought to the surface an old belief that I had carried for a long time, that maybe my voice didn't matter as much as everyone else's. And it's one that I thought I had worked on. I thought I was getting there, but there was so much hidden in there. It brought to the surface this belief that I wasn't important enough to be included before this big decision was made. And whether that belief was true or not wasn't really the point. The point was that it was there. And I can't heal something that I'm not willing to see. And one of the biggest shifts that I've made in my own life is changing the questions that I ask myself. I used to ask myself, Why is this happening to me? Why does this keep happening? What did I do wrong? And those questions kept me focused on the circumstance. So today I ask a different question. I ask, how is this happening for me? Or why is this affecting me so much? And that question changes everything because it shifts my attention from what's happening outside of me to what's happening inside of me. It invites me to be curious instead of being judgmental. It creates space to understand instead of simply just reacting like I would have in the past. And I've also learned that every emotion carries information. Fear has a way of making us contract. We become smaller. We protect ourselves. We avoid making decisions because we're afraid of making the wrong one. Shame causes us to hide, and I know that firsthand. It whispers that we're not enough and that we should have figured everything out by now. Frustration usually points to something that needs our attention, and frustration is one of the signs in human design that generators, or maybe it's manifestors, I think it's generators, need to pay attention to. But then there's curiosity, and curiosity opens us up. It allows us to ask better questions. And asking better questions gives us hope. And hope opens us up to the moment that we begin to believe that something different might be possible. That's when our energy shifts. That's when we start noticing there are opportunities that have probably been there all along, but fear keeps us from seeing them. And that's why I no longer see triggers as something to avoid. Even though they're hard to face, they're teachers for us. Every trigger points towards something that's asking to be understood. That doesn't mean that the feelings disappear. Believe me, they don't. I still get triggered, and sometimes I choose not to touch that trigger that day. The difference is that I notice it sooner. And instead of immediately reacting, I can pause and ask myself, what story am I believing right now? What story am I telling myself? Is that story helping me or is it keeping me stuck? And sometimes those answers aren't comfortable. Sometimes they're downright scary, but they're always worth discovering. And it's all within you. It's all something you can do on your own. And when you do this, awareness creates choice. So when you become aware of the stories that you're telling yourself, you finally have the power to choose a different story. And when I look back now at my life, I can honestly say that if my husband hadn't told me that he wanted to retire that day, I probably never would have started asking a completely different question, not about myself this time, but about my finances. Something interesting happened after that conversation. I had 3 years before my husband planned to retire, and the old me would have gone into full panic mode. I would have worried constantly, and I probably would have convinced myself that I needed to work more hours, save more money, or somehow figure everything out. But something changed. The work that I had been doing on myself had taught me that worry isn't the same thing as preparation. I learned that worry doesn't help anybody. And it doesn't change anything. It only hurts you. And worry usually keeps us stuck in fear. Preparation is what keeps us moving forward. So instead of obsessing over what I could control, I started focusing on, I'm sorry, instead of focusing on what I couldn't control, I started focusing on what I could control. So I did pick up a few more hours at my part-time job. I continued building the coaching business. I kept learning. I was growing. And then I did something that was completely out of character for me. I let it go. Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't have concerns, because believe me, I did, but because I had learned to trust that I don't need to have every answer immediately. I believe that if I kept taking the next right step, the next opportunity would show itself when the time was right. And I trusted in that. And I trusted in God. And about a year later, that's exactly what happened. And it was almost a year to the day. Someone introduced me to a financial program that offered a free analysis. And at first, I wasn't looking for a business. I wasn't looking for a career change. Honestly, I was just looking for answers for myself. And I wanted to know one thing. Was there a smarter way to manage the money that I already had? I'm not talking about the stuff that my financial advisor does for me because I do have one of those. He invests for me. This is the money that I use every day to live life and pay my bills. It's that part of my budget. I had a financial advisor. I do have one. He's wonderful. I love him. But I wanted to know a smarter way to use the money that I had for paying bills. And I was looking for clarity around something different. I wanted to understand the money that was flowing through my everyday life, including how interest rates work, the money coming in, the money going out, the debt we still had, the mortgage, the interest we were paying, all that stuff. I wanted to know if there was a more efficient way to use that money that we were already earning. And I know there's a million different ways that you can do it. I know there's banking principles and I know from my background with this, I know about those banking principles. But at the time that I found this, I didn't know about any banking principle. So I just said yes to the free analysis, not because I expected it to change my life, just because I was curious. And curiosity has become one of the greatest gifts that I've ever given myself. And when I saw the analysis, I was honestly shocked. It showed me that by my making strategic changes, not earning more money, not refinancing, not consolidating debt, just using what we already had, by using that differently, we could become debt-free years sooner and save tens of thousands of dollars in interest. And it wasn't just the numbers that caught my attention, it was the clarity. For the first time, I wasn't guessing. I wasn't wondering if I was doing the right thing. I could actually see a path. And I could see that path both ways. I could see if I stayed on the same trajectory I was on or if I took this new way of doing it. Either way, the path was set for me. I had the clarity. And something inside of me shifted. Because when you see what's possible, hope replaces uncertainty, and uncertainty is where it's scary. Hope changes the way you think. It changes the decisions you make. It changes the conversations you have. It changes what you believe is possible for your future. And that's when I realized something that has become one of the guiding principles in my life that I didn't realize until I was reflecting, and that's clarity creates confidence. Whether it's understanding yourself or understanding your relationships or understanding your finances, when you can finally see clearly where you are and where you're going, making decisions becomes that much easier. And I had no idea that this free financial analysis wasn't just going to give me clarity about my own finances. It was quietly introducing me to the next chapter of my purpose. Purpose is a journey. So as I continued learning more about the program, I found myself attending more and more of their educational trainings. And at first, I just really wanted to understand how it all worked. And the more I learned, the more fascinated I became, not just because of the math and the algorithms and the lines of code, not just because of the strategy, but because I kept coming back to the same word, clarity. It was giving people something that I had watched so many of my clients searching for: hope. Before I began this journey, I spent several years helping people better understand themselves, and I saw the hope in their eyes every time. And through that coaching, I watched people experience those incredible breakthroughs. They gained confidence. They discovered what their strengths were. They began making decisions that were more aligned with who they truly were. But one topic came up over and over and over again, and it was always money. So many people wanted to understand why they struggled financially. Some wanted to know if they were ever going to feel financially secure. Others wondered why they worked so hard but never felt like time. I could help them understand those patterns. I could help them uncover those limiting beliefs. I could help them recognize the stories that they'd been telling themselves about money. And that work was incredibly, incredibly valuable, but I couldn't show them a practical path forward. And looking back now, I realized that all of that was preparing me for what came next. Because once I experienced financial clarity for myself, everything clicked into place. I realized that understanding our beliefs is really important because sometimes people also need to see what's possible. You can tell someone to believe in themselves all day long. But when they can actually see a plan, when they can actually see a timeline, when they can see a different future other than the one they imagined, something changes. Hope becomes tangible. They stop asking, can I do this? And they begin asking, when can I get started? And that's a completely different energy. It's the difference between feeling stuck and feeling empowered. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. Looking back over my entire career, there was a thread that connected everything I'd ever done. I started my career in my early 20s in quality control. My job was to look for imperfections, to notice the things that weren't aligned. And then later, I moved into materials management. I traced parts through the manufacturing process, making sure that every piece was exactly where it needed to be and accounted for. And then I spent years working in finance, tracing the dollars, understanding the costs, following the numbers. I could tell you what every component of a medical device was, when it got put on, and how much it cost. I could trace every product. I could trace the money. But if you asked me who I was, what mattered most to me, or what I was truly here to do, I didn't have an answer. Isn't that interesting? I knew how to trace everything outside of myself, but I had never learned how to trace myself. That journey inward for me changed so many things. And today I realize I'm still tracing, only now I'm tracing something different. I'm helping people trace the connection between their thoughts, their beliefs, their decisions, and the life that they're creating. And sometimes that journey begins with greater self-awareness. Sometimes it begins with financial clarity. Sometimes it begins with a conversation like the one my husband and I had. The starting point is different for everyone, but the destination, pretty similar. Greater clarity, greater confidence, greater freedom. And I don't believe that that's a coincidence. I believe that every experience here, every challenge, every lesson, every setback, every person was preparing me to do exactly what I'm doing today. Not because I have all the answers, but because I've learned that clarity has the power to change everything. So, where does that leave me today? Today, it leaves me doing work that I absolutely love because it combines so many pieces of my journey, and the teams and the people that I connect with are the kind of people that I envisioned working with. I manifested this, and I still believe that awareness is where transformation begins. I believe that our thoughts matter. I believe the stories we tell ourselves shape the decisions we make. And I've also come to believe that clarity creates confidence. And confidence changes how we move through the world. One of the things I say often is that most of us use GPS without even thinking about it. If we're driving somewhere unfamiliar, we don't just guess. I use it all the time. I use it even locally. But you don't just guess. You pull out your phone, you type in the destination, the GPS tells you where you are, where you're going, what's the best route to get there. If there's traffic, it reroutes you. If you miss a turn, it doesn't shame you. It has no emotions. It doesn't care. It simply figures out how to find another way. Wouldn't it be amazing if we approached our finances the same way? Most people have goals. They want to retire someday. They'd love to pay off their mortgage. Maybe they dream of taking their family on vacation without putting it on a credit card. Or maybe they want to buy a second home, help their kids through college, or just stop feeling stressed every time a bill arrives. The problem isn't that people don't have dreams. The problem is that most people have never been shown the best route to get there. We're doing the best we can with what we know. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's where I was. I wasn't irresponsible with money. I wasn't careless. In fact, I was probably more organized than most people. I managed our household finances. I tracked our spending. I paid the bills. I had a budget. Kinda, sorta. Not really, but a little bit. Like I knew how much I needed to pay household bills. Above and beyond that, that wasn't part of my budget, but it is now. But what I discovered was that being organized isn't always the same thing as being optimized. Sometimes there are opportunities we simply can't see because no one has ever shown us another way, and maybe our beliefs are stopping us from even thinking about looking at another way. And that's what was so powerful for me. The financial analysis that I had didn't tell me I was doing everything wrong. It simply showed me another possibility. It gave me two different scenarios that let me choose. It gave me clarity. And I had clarity on either side. I could see exactly what I was getting. And clarity gave me confidence. The confidence to stop wondering, the confidence to make informed decisions, and to believe that the future that I wanted might actually be achievable. I want to leave a legacy. That's my goal. But that experience changed way more than my finances. It changed the way I think because I realized something that's true in almost every area of life. When we can see what's possible, we're far more willing to take action. Hope is a powerful motivator. It's not false hope. It's not wishful thinking. It's real hope. The kind that comes from understanding where you are today, seeing where you want to go, and knowing that there's a realistic path to get there. It's all in front of you in black and white. It's actually red and green, I think. And that's really what I hope to give people. Whether we're talking about personal growth or finances, my goal isn't to tell someone what to do. It's to help them to see more clearly. Because when people have clarity, they don't need someone making decisions for them. They can make empowered decisions for themselves. To me, it's one of the greatest gifts that we can offer another person. So, as I wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. If you've been listening to my story, I hope that you realize it isn't really about retirement. It isn't about finances. It's about paying attention to the moments that stop us in our tracks, paying attention to the emotions that rise up inside of us, paying attention to the patterns that keep repeating, because those moments aren't happening to us by accident. Those are the moments that are inviting us to grow. One of the greatest lessons I've learned is that life has a way of preparing us before it reveals why. When my husband told me he wanted to retire, I thought my challenge was figuring out the money. But looking back now, I realized that the first lesson wasn't about money at all. It was about trust. It was about communication. It was about healing old beliefs. It was about learning not to let fear make my decisions. The financial piece came later, and that's something that I've seen over and over again in my own life. The challenge often arrives before the purpose reveals itself. That's why I encourage you to stay curious. The next time something doesn't go according to plan, instead of immediately asking, why is this happening to me? Try asking, what might this be preparing me for? Or what is this trying to teach me? And remember, you might not get the answer today. You might not even have it next week. It took me a year to reflect on this and get all of this out of it. But one day you're going to look back and you're going to realize that what felt like an obstacle was actually pointing you to a path that you just couldn't see yet. And I also want to encourage you to stay open. Sometimes opportunities show up wearing clothes we don't recognize. Sometimes the thing that changes your life doesn't look like anything you expected it to. If someone offers you a different perspective, if someone invites you to learn something new or to share an opportunity with you, you don't have to say yes, but don't automatically say no before you understand it. Curiosity has changed my life far more than certainty ever has. For me, saying yes to one free financial analysis didn't just help me see my finances differently. It helped me to see my future differently. It reminded me that clarity creates confidence, and confidence gives us the courage to take the next step. Today, I have the privilege of helping people create that same kind of clarity, and sometimes that means helping someone better understand themselves, and sometimes it means helping them to understand their finances. And sometimes it means showing them a way to create additional income while serving others and making a meaningful difference. Because we also do that here too. We want this shared with the world. So we do hire other people. No matter where someone begins, my hope is always the same. To help them to remove clarity from, to help them to move from confusion to clarity, from fear to confidence, from simply surviving and living on autopilot to intentionally creating the life they want to live. Because that's what becoming is all about. It's not about becoming someone different. It's about becoming more fully yourself. One choice, one lesson, one moment of awareness at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. And you can choose at any time not to step outside your comfort zone. I've done it. Sometimes we just don't have the capacity. Give yourself grace. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Whatever challenge you're facing today, remember this. You don't have to have your entire life figured out. You don't have to know every single step. You don't even have to know where your journey is ultimately leading. You just have to be willing to take the next step. Trust that experience is teaching you something. Pay attention to the things that get put in front of you. They're put there for a reason. Pay attention to the lessons. Pay attention to the patterns. Pay attention to the opportunities that show up when you least expect them, because sometimes the very thing that feels like it's interrupting your life is actually introducing you to the life you were meant to live. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Courage to Become. If this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment. Let me know what part of today's conversation spoke to you. I just spilled my drink all over my computer here. And of course, I have no napkins. Um, have you ever had a challenge that looking back maybe became one of your greatest blessings? Or is there something that you're navigating right now that you're trying to make sense of that I can help you with? If you have questions or there's a topic you'd love for me to explore or to explore in a future episode, let me know that too. Some of my favorite conversations begin with a simple question. And if you know someone who could benefit from hearing today's message, please share this episode with them. You never know when one conversation can change the direction of someone's life. And if you haven't already, I'd be so, so, so grateful if you would like, follow, and subscribe to this podcast. It helps more people discover these conversations so together we can continue building a community of people who are choosing growth, embracing awareness, and having the courage to become who they were created to be. Until next time, stay curious, choose clarity, and have the courage to become. I'll see you next time.